Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking back at a phone that you might think is old news.
Oh, yeah.
The Samsung Galaxy S9.
Okay.
But trust me, there's some really impressive tech under the hood that I think is worth another look.
Okay.
And we're going to be looking at a review of the phone.
Okay.
From 2023, so that's a few years after it was released, to see just how well this phone has aged.
I think it's always fun to go back and look at a device like the S9 with a little bit of hindsight.
Yeah.
You know, it lets us kind of appreciate those innovations that maybe flew under the radar at the time.
Right.
And see how they kind of set the stage for all the smartphones that we're using today.
For sure, for sure. And, at first glance, you might think, the S9,
Yeah.
it's just another smartphone from, years gone by. But I think if we dig a little deeper, you'll be pretty surprised by what we find.
Okay.
So why don't we start with the display?
Okay.
The S9 has a 5.8-inch Super AMOLED screen.
Wow.
With a resolution of 2960 by 1440 pixels.
That's impressive.
Yeah, that's higher resolution than a lot of laptops even have today.
Yeah, I mean, imagine a screen where you can barely even see the individual pixels.
Right.
The text would be so crisp and the images would just be packed with detail.
Absolutely.
And we can't forget about the HDR certification.
All right.
I mean, that means that the S9 could display a wider range of colors and contrast, so everything just looks so much more vibrant and lifelike.
Yeah, it's like having this tiny little HDR TV right in your pocket.
Exactly.
I'm starting to see why people were so excited about this phone back in 2018.
Yeah.
But a great display is nothing without the power to back it up.
Oh, absolutely.
So you need the horsepower.
Yeah. What's under the hood?
Well, the S9 definitely did not disappoint in that department.
Okay.
It had the Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 processor.
Okay.
This was like the top of the line chip back in 2018.
Wow.
The kind that you would find in like the most powerful phones of that year.
Oh, it was designed to handle really demanding tasks like high-end gaming and multitasking without, breaking a sweat.
So it could handle it all.
Yeah.
And to make sure those graphics look good.
Yes.
The S9 also had an Adreno 630 GPU.
Yes.
Now, I know that sounds a little complicated.
Yeah.
But basically, it's the part of the phone that handles all the visuals.
Exactly.
Like the 3D graphics and high-res video.
Exactly. So all that visual heavy lifting.
Yeah.
The S9 could handle it.
It could handle pretty much anything you threw at it, even by 2023 standards.
Even by 2023 standards.
Oh, wow. Okay, so let's move on to another area where the S9 really impressed.
Okay.
And that's the camera.
Okay, this is where things get interesting.
Yeah, the S9 had a 12MP rear camera.
Okay.
Which, on its own, that's not really groundbreaking these days.
Right.
But what set it apart was this variable aperture.
Oh, yeah.
It could switch between f1.5
Wow.
and f2.4.
Okay.
So basically what that means is it could adapt to different lighting conditions. Okay.
And also create those blurry background effects.
Yeah, the bokeh.
Yeah, that everybody loves these days.
Yeah, it's like having a professional camera lens that can actually physically adjust.
Right.
To let in more or less light.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that f1.5 aperture was especially impressive for low light photography.
Oh.
It could capture way more light.
Right.
Which meant you got brighter and clearer photos even when it was dim.
So even if you're in a, dimly lit restaurant or a bar.
Yes, exactly.
You could still get a good picture.
You could still get a great shot.
Wow. But it wasn't just about the low light performance, was it?
No, not at all.
The variable aperture also gave users more control over the depth of field.
Right.
Like that blurry background that makes the subject pop.
Exactly. And don't forget about the live focus feature.
Oh, yeah.
That was really cool.
What was that?
You could actually adjust the level of background blur after you took the photo.
Oh, wow.
So it gave you even more creative control. So you could play around with it afterwards.
Exactly. And that's a feature that's, still widely used in smartphones today.
Yeah.
And the S9 was one of the pioneers of that.
Wow. So even though smartphone cameras have come a long way since then, it sounds like the S9 was ahead of its time.
It really was.
It wasn't just about taking pictures. It was about giving you more creative control.
Exactly.
And a more versatile experience.
I like how you put that.
Now, before we move on, I do want to touch upon another feature that was a big deal back then.
Oh, yeah.
The super slow-mo video recording.
Oh, yes.
I remember seeing those commercials.
Oh, they were everywhere.
They were really pushing the super slow-mo.
I know, and it was pretty impressive at the time.
Yeah.
The S9 could record video at 960 frames per second.
Wow.
So you could capture those really fleeting moments in incredible detail.
Yeah.
Imagine, a water balloon bursting.
Oh, yeah?
Or a hummingbird flapping its wings.
Yeah.
All in slow motion. It was like a whole new way to see the world.
It must have been like having a high-speed camera in your pocket.
Exactly.
But okay, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about security and durability.
Okay.
This is something that Samsung has always been known for. You know, they really pay attention to detail.
They do. They do.
So what did the S9 bring to the table in these departments?
Well, for starters, the S9 was just packed with security features.
Okay.
Had a fingerprint sensor, facial recognition,
Right.
and even iris scanning.
Really?
So you could kind of choose whichever security method worked best for you.
Okay.
But it went beyond just unlocking your phone.
Okay.
The S9 also had this feature called Secure Folder.
What's that?
So it was basically like a separate encrypted space on your phone.
Oh, okay.
Where you could store like sensitive data like apps, files, and photos.
Okay.
So it's kind of like having a digital vault right inside your phone.
Wow, that sounds really secure.
It was.
But what about the durability of the phone itself?
Oh, the S9 was no slouch in that department either. It had an IP68 rating.
Okay.
Which means it was both water and dust resistant.
Oh, wow.
So you accidentally dropping it in the sink or taking it to the beach, you didn't have to worry about damaging it.
That's a big plus.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many phones I've, ruined from water damage.
Right.
But it wasn't just about the water and dust.
No.
The S9 also had Corning Gorilla Glass 5 for the display.
Yeah.
So it was also more resistant to scratches and cracks.
So they really went the extra mile to make sure that the S9 could withstand like the wear and tear of everyday life.
Yeah, it sounds like they really thought of everything.
They did.
But we've covered a lot of ground already.
I know we have.
And there's still so much more to explore.
There is.
So join us in part 2 of this deep dive.
Okay.
As we delve into the S9's software, battery life, and some of the other hidden gems that we haven't even talked about yet.
Awesome. I can't wait.
I'm excited to see what else we find.
Me too.
So stay tuned, everybody.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Samsung Galaxy S9.
So far, we've uncovered a phone that's surprisingly powerful and packed with features.
Definitely.
But there's still so much more to explore,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to the software experience.
Okay.
The S9 came with Android 8.0 Oreo,
Okay.
which was the latest Android version at the time.
Right.
But Samsung didn't just stop there.
Right.
They added their own custom user interface on top of it.
Oh, yeah.
Called One UI.
One UI was a pretty big deal back then.
Oh, okay. Why is that?
Well, it was specifically designed to make using larger phones easier.
Okay.
Especially with one hand.
Right.
You know, a lot of phones were starting to get pretty big around that time.
Yeah.
And navigating them with one hand could be a little bit challenging.
Yeah, for sure.
So Samsung really put a lot of thought into how to make that experience a lot more intuitive and comfortable, especially on a bigger screen.
That's really forward-thinking of them.
It was.
Considering how much bigger phones have gotten since then. But it wasn't just about making the interface more user-friendly.
Right.
One UI also introduced some new features.
Okay, like what?
Like Bixby.
Oh, yeah, Bixby.
Samsung's own virtual assistant.
I remember Bixby.
I remember it being a big talking point when the S9 was first launched.
For sure.
How did it stack up to the competition?
Well, Bixby definitely had its strengths and weaknesses.
Okay.
Just like any virtual assistant.
Right.
It could control your smart home devices.
Okay.
Set reminders. Translate text in real time.
Wow.
Even launch apps with voice commands.
Okay.
Yeah, it aimed to be this, like, comprehensive assistant.
It sounds pretty capable.
It was.
But I do remember some people criticizing Bixby for being a little clunky.
It could be a little bit clunky.
Yeah, and maybe not as intuitive as some of the other virtual assistants that were out there.
Sure.
Did Samsung ever address those concerns?
They definitely made improvements over time.
Okay.
You know, they refined its capabilities and tried to fix some of those usability issues. But, you know, it never really reached the same level of popularity or integration as some of its competitors.
Yeah, that's true.
But it was still an ambitious effort by Samsung
to
kind of create their own ecosystem of connected services.
Right. It's really interesting to see how those early attempts at virtual assistants have evolved over the years.
They really have.
They were definitely laying the groundwork for what we have today.
Absolutely.
Speaking of evolution, let's talk about another crucial aspect of any smartphone.
Okay.
Battery life.
Right.
The S9 had a 3000 milliamp battery.
Okay.
Which doesn't sound that impressive these days.
Not really.
But how did it hold up in real-world usage back then?
Well, battery technology has come a long way since 2018.
Right.
So yeah, 3000 milliamp might seem a little underwhelming now.
Yeah.
But back then, it was considered pretty decent.
Okay.
And Samsung also included fast charging and wireless charging.
Oh, okay.
So, even if you were running low on power, you could get a pretty good boost in just a few minutes.
Oh, that's nice.
Or just place it on a wireless charging pad.
Yeah.
Super convenient.
For sure. Especially for people who are always on the go.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered the display, performance, camera, security, durability, software, and battery life.
I think we've hit all the major points.
Is there anything else we've missed?
Yeah, we've hit most of them.
Okay.
But there are a couple of other noteworthy features that might surprise you.
Oh, really? Okay. I'm intrigued.
For example, the S9 still had a headphone jack.
Had a headphone jack.
In 2018.
Wow, that's practically ancient history.
I know, right? It was becoming less common even back then.
Right.
As more and more manufacturers were ditching it.
Yeah, everybody was going wireless.
Exactly, in favor of wireless audio solutions.
Right.
But Samsung recognized that a lot of people still preferred wired headphones.
Yeah.
The convenience and the reliability.
Sure.
So they decided to keep that option available.
Yeah.
For those who weren't quite ready to make the jump to wireless.
It's funny how something that was once so common can become a novelty in just a few years.
I know, it's crazy.
It really shows how quickly technology changes.
It does.
But I can definitely appreciate Samsung's decision to cater to those who still wanted that headphone jack.
Yeah.
It shows that they were thinking about the needs of a wide range of users.
Absolutely. They weren't just blindly following trends.
Right.
They were making deliberate choices.
Yeah.
Based on what they thought would provide the best experience for their customers.
That's a good approach.
It is.
And another example of that is the expandable storage option.
Oh, yeah?
The S9 came with 64 gigabytes of internal storage,
Yeah.
which was decent at the time.
Yeah.
But they also included a micro SD card slot, so you could expand the storage.
Exactly.
If you needed more space for photos or videos or apps.
For all that stuff.
Yeah, that's a feature that a lot of manufacturers are leaving out these days.
They are.
But for people who like to capture a lot of photos and videos, or who just like to have a lot of apps and files on their phone.
Yeah.
It can be a real lifesaver.
It can.
Because it gives you that flexibility to tailor the storage capacity to your own needs.
It's all about choice.
Right.
Giving people options.
So it sounds like the S9 really tried to offer something for everyone.
It did.
They combined those cutting edge features with some of those tried and true elements that people still loved.
Yeah. It was a really great balance of innovation and familiarity.
Yeah.
Samsung didn't just throw everything out the window and start from scratch.
Yeah.
They took what worked well, refined it,
Yeah.
and added those new features that just made the whole experience even better.
It was a smart approach.
It was.
And it clearly resonated with a lot of people.
It did.
But our deep dive isn't over yet.
It's not.
There's still more to uncover.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
What else is there?
In part 3, we're going to wrap things up by looking at the legacy of the S9.
Okay.
And how it influenced future smartphone development.
Interesting.
We'll also talk about some of those compromises that Samsung made and whether they were the right choices in hindsight.
Okay. I'm excited.
This is getting more and more intriguing.
It is.
I can't wait to see how it all comes together.
Me too.
So join us in part 3 for the grand finale.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've spent the last 2 parts really getting to know the Samsung Galaxy S9, and I think it's safe to say it was packed with impressive features and innovative ideas.
Yeah, it's been a fun journey, hasn't it? Going back and looking at a phone like the S9 with, a little bit of historical perspective.
Right.
I think it helps us appreciate how some of these features, that might have seemed ordinary at the time, actually played a pretty big role in shaping the smartphones that we're all using today.
Absolutely. And it's really amazing to see how some of those innovations from back then
have evolved and become, almost commonplace
in
the phones we use now.
Totally.
But as we wrap up our deep dive into the S9, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on its lasting legacy.
Okay.
How did this phone influence, the future of smartphone development?
Well, I think the S9's legacy is kind of multifaceted.
Okay.
First, it really showed that Samsung was willing to push the boundaries.
Right.
And take some risks.
Okay.
Like that variable aperture camera, for example.
Yeah.
That was a pretty bold move.
It was.
And it really kind of paved the way for the even more sophisticated camera systems that we see in smartphones today.
It's like they were saying, we're not just going to, follow the trends, we're going to set them.
Exactly.
And that willingness to experiment and innovate has definitely continued in their phones.
Absolutely. And, those risks often paid off.
Right.
I mean, they set new standards for the industry and really raised the bar for what consumers could expect.
For sure.
From a flagship smartphone.
And I think that's something that Samsung has, continued to do.
They have. And the S9, I think, really solidified Samsung's position.
Okay.
As like a major player in the Android market.
Okay. Yeah. They were offering a really compelling combination of powerful hardware, sleek design, innovative features that appealed to a really broad audience.
They weren't just like throwing specs at a wall.
Right.
And hoping something stuck.
They were really trying to create a cohesive and enjoyable user experience.
100%.
And honestly, I think that's something that a lot of manufacturers sometimes overlook.
Sometimes.
And lastly, I think the S9's legacy is really evident in the features that are standard in smartphones today.
Oh, yeah.
High-resolution displays, powerful processors, advanced camera systems, water resistance, all of it. All things that the S9 helped popularize.
Absolutely.
And normalize.
The S9 helped make them the norm.
Yeah. It's funny how quickly things that were once considered cutting edge become the baseline expectation.
Yeah.
It really speaks to just how quickly technology is advancing.
It moves so fast.
But were there any areas where Samsung maybe missed the mark?
Well, there's always going to be some compromises, right?
Right.
In any product design.
Of course. Of course.
And the S9 was no exception.
Okay.
For example, some users didn't like the placement of the fingerprint sensor.
Okay.
That was on the back of the phone.
Okay.
And some people found it a little awkward to reach.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And, while the 3000 milliamp battery was fine for the time, it wasn't like, amazing.
Right.
And battery life was definitely an area where some competitors were starting to do better.
So even in a phone as well-rounded as the S9, there were still some areas where they could have maybe pushed the envelope a little bit further.
It's always fun to think about those what-ifs.
It is.
In tech history.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the S9 was a product of its time.
Right.
And it represented a significant step forward for smartphones.
It did.
Its strengths definitely outweighed its weaknesses.
For sure.
And its impact on the industry is undeniable.
Well, I think we've really thoroughly explored the Samsung Galaxy S9.
We have.
From its impressive display and innovative camera to its thoughtful software features.
Yeah.
And its lasting legacy.
It's a great phone.
And I think for anyone listening who might have dismissed the S9 as just another smartphone, I hope we've shown that it was much more than that.
Oh, yeah.
It was a device that really packed a punch.
It did.
Both in terms of its capabilities and its impact on the smartphone world.
I think so, too.
Well, this has been such an insightful deep dive.
It has.
But before we go, I do have one question for our listeners. Think back to all the phones you've owned over the years.
Right.
Was there ever a feature that maybe seemed ordinary or unimportant at the time, but that you later realized was a real game changer?
Okay.
Something that you didn't even know you needed until it was gone?
Interesting question.
Share your thoughts with us on social media or through our website.
Let us know.
We'd love to hear your stories. Until next time.
See ya. Keep exploring.
Keep diving.
Keep learning.
Keep learning.
And keep diving deep.